Am I building a block editor for Ruby on Rails? Really? Like, am I crazy? Maybe. That could be possible. A couple weeks ago, I started working on the documentation for instrumental components, and I didn't want to just use the tricks editor because I wanted more control over the documentation to make it more dynamic and mix and match different content types and do some more dynamic things with it. And I started playing around with some of the other rich editing tools out there. I wasn't really happy with all the options. I started sort of like hacking on something, and here's what I have so far. I've been at this for over a month now. It's come a pretty long way. It's not quite ready for release yet. I'd say there's still a lot more to go. It's pretty raw, but hey, take a look. So I can use it. It's very keyboard friendly. This is a paragraph, and I can highlight something and get some formatting. I'll tab through and hit return, make it italic. Pretty cool. Go on to the next block. This is another block, and I can also Command K to set up a link. Now, it's also Markdown friendly. It doesn't support all of Markdown, but I'm just including the bits that I want to have. So, for example, if I want to make a headline, I can go like that. Headline 1, headline 2, headline 3, headline 4. So that's pretty cool. I think I also have block quotes in there. And I also have it mostly working where I can select multiple blocks and delete them. And then this last piece was so difficult to set up, and that is lists. So I'm going to start a list by using the Markdown syntax, just a dash and a space. This is list item 1, another list item, and I'm going to indent by hitting tab, indented item. I'll indent again, and I can hit shift tab. Oops, I think I can hit shift tab to bring it back out. It should also work with ordered lists. So there we go. It's at a pretty good point. So I can, again, I can delete all that stuff. What am I trying to do with this here? Really right now, my goals from the product standpoint are to make sure that I cover all of the essential editing pieces that I would want in a block editor. Now, each of these paragraphs, if you will, are individual blocks, and the list items are also individual blocks, but these are like parent-child relationships. So like this block is a child of this block, which is inside of a UL. And I'll start to kind of poke around at the code here in just a minute, but I want to talk a bit about where I'm going with this. Again, like each of these are blocks, and so far it's not doing a whole lot that's actually very different from something like tricks or action text, but I plan to make it even more dynamic. If you're familiar with editing documents or editing pages in Notion, where you can hit the like the slash key, I haven't implemented that yet, but I want to be able to, mix and match different formats using like a slash menu, and then being able to like drag and drop blocks up and down in the document. That's going to be another important piece of this. But then most importantly is to mix and match content types. So far I have these, basically just text content types, but I'm definitely going to want to have some blocks be like code blocks. Other blocks show a video. Other blocks might even be behind a login wall or a form. And again, I want to be able to drag and drop and mix and match the ordering and the layout of those things. So that's ultimately what I would like to do as a user of this component in my projects. My first use case is the documentation for instrumental components. So everything that I want to do with those docs to make them as dynamic and useful for users as possible. That's what I'm trying to accomplish in building my own editor. But I can also see this being very useful for any Rails application that has CMS-like features, like content management features. One of the other things that I want to do is being able to, like, when you use the slash command to like edit the settings on an individual block, we should be able to apply a CSS class to it or a CSS ID, so that if you have other stuff going on in your app or on your page, you can hook into specific CSS classes. You don't have that level of control when you're just using something like action text or tricks. So let's poke under the hood here and see how I'm doing some of this. And I'm trying to make it as core to Rails as possible without many outside dependencies, and really no outside dependencies, if you will. But so far, here's how it's basically put together. I'm not going to dig into exactly everything because there's a lot, but here's the block model. That's really the core thing. And then blocks controller is where a lot of the action happens, of course. The update and create actions. And, it's very rough right now, so I'm going to need to do a lot of refactoring. So far, there's a lot of repetition of code and so many different little tiny user flows that I had to sort of handle. So this is creating new blocks, and then, that was updating blocks, and this is creating blocks, and these look very similar. So there's going to be a lot of refactoring. These actions then hit turbo streams. So on update, we have all these different scenarios. You're seeing a bunch of variables here to basically handle all the little situations that happen in an editor, right? So if I'm updating, deleting a block might happen during an update, right? So for example, here I'm actually going to delete 2 blocks, but if I go in here and I delete all the content in that block, I need to actually update it by deleting the block, right? Or if I'm starting a new block and then I convert it to a headline, I do this thing where we are reformatting. So a lot of that is happening in Turbo, but then all the real fun stuff is mostly happening in JavaScript in stimulus controllers. So I've got an editor controller, and this is sort of more of a high level handling of the whole document. And that's for, so I've got stimulus actions for start editing. So if we start over and I have no blocks, hitting add block will start the first block. I can select multiple blocks. That selection is happening in this editor controller, starting the range, ending the range. That's the range of this one starts, this one ends, and detecting which one we are in, which one we're not in, and then clicking backspace will delete them. Clearing the selections, clicking somewhere else should clear it. So that's happening in editor controller. And then I have editor inline formatting controller. And this one is handling the little popover thing. So this is a power text. And then when I highlight text, it's popping up this inline editing or inline formatting popover. All of that is being handled in all this JavaScript code. As you can see, what I'm doing is it became so complex that I really started to lean heavily on commenting almost every single line of code from, especially in the JavaScript, but throughout the blocks controller here, I'm there are so many little scenarios to handle that I needed to sort of remind myself, what is everything? I'm a very descriptive namer of variables. Maybe one of the weird things on my coding style is I just like to make things as obvious, and even if it means long names for things, I just want to be super clear and verbose compared to I just don't want to shorten things just for the hell of it, because then it's just going to take me more time later to figure out what it was. So between the long naming and just describing what every single line does, that's really helpful for me when I'm working on one of these huge projects over a long period of time, just sort of tinkering away at it. I find that really helpful. So anyway, this editor inline formatting controller. So some of the things that I'm handling here, we've got, click events, key up, key down events, tabbing to the button. So another thing that I'm really trying to focus on here is the use of the keyboard as much as possible, right? So I can hit escape to get out of that. I should be able to, it's very buggy right now, but I should be able to hit down to go through all of the paragraphs and just hit up. And then I'm going to highlight using the keyboard. And then I can use tab to tab through all of the buttons. And I can even just hit enter to apply that button. I can hit tab again to get to the link popover. I'll hit that. And that enters a new state in the popover. And that's where I'm applying a link. And I can tab my way back. Well, that one exited. So, a lot of tinkering needed there. So that's the inline formatting controller. A lot more is happening there that I didn't quite get into. There's a lot of logic around like whether or not the popover is currently shown. And then positioning the popover was also very difficult because we're constantly positioning and then repositioning based on where the selection of text is. All this stuff is like so deep that like I wouldn't have normally tried to tackle a lot of this stuff if it wasn't for AI and Cursor, honestly. I did a whole other video on my channel about how I'm using Cursor to help me kind of dive deeper and be more ambitious in the things that I go after. And I heavily used, Cursor and asking for how to refactor things and how to bust through technical problems. A lot of that happened in this JavaScript. So that's been pretty awesome. Anyway, that's the inline formatting controller part. And then the one where most of, like, this is really where everything is happening, where I've been spending the most time at least, is editor block controller. At first I thought I was going to have like one big controller, but then I realized I needed to split these out. Editor block controller is sort of the interaction with individual blocks. So when I hit the return button, that is going to trigger a bunch of stuff, right? So let's see, handle enter key. We need to sort of figure out, like, am I, like, one of the things that took me a long time was, let's say I have a block like this, right? If I want to split this into two blocks, if I hit enter in the middle of that should split it and take the part before the cursor and keep it in this block, and the part after the cursor, create a new block, put it in there, and then focus the cursor there so that I can keep, continuing to edit. The other thing here is, like, if I'm at the start of a block and I hit the delete key, it should merge this block with the block before it. And there's a ton of logic that goes into that. And then even more logic to make sure that the cursor remains in the right position. So it's just like getting deeper and deeper. The more I go down this rabbit hole, the harder this project gets, it seems. But it's also really fun, and I feel like I'm really improving my skills as a builder. Again, a lot of it thanks to AI. And like under the hood here, in editing mode, if you will, there's a lot of random markup here that I need to kind of hook into. For example, like I was just talking about, I'm inserting a merged content span and defining a unique ID to be able to find that in the JavaScript after the operation completes. And so all sorts of weird, complicated stuff is happening in the editor itself. But I also want to make sure that, as you can see, it's getting kind of buggy now that I'm playing with it. So I also want to make sure that even though I have a lot of stuff happening in the markup, and you can see all these like stimulus values attached to the block container, turbo frames, a lot of weird stuff happening in the editor mode. But on the front end, when we're in like the show mode, I do want to make sure that it's super clean markup that's coming out. I'm going to clean this up a little bit more, but like so far we've got paragraph, 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 UL, and then inside this UL we have an LI, and this LI contains another UL, and inside that we've got another UI. So, and I'm going to get rid of this like extra empty class thing, but I just want to make sure that on the front end we are delivering really, really clean markup, so that when this component is installed in like a CMS product or any other feature or product where we just need really easily controllable output on the front end or on like the show, like the user facing end, that's what this thing does. Because I do find that a lot of the other editor libraries and block editors, they just add so much bloat and so much weirdness to the markup on the front end that it makes it really difficult to design around and apply custom CSS to and things like that. So I just want to make sure that all this is really clean. The editor part, there's just no way around it. We have to have a lot of logic that's happening under the hood. I'll give you another quick look at this. Again, I know it's sort of like disjointed because I'm sort of just like jumping through it, but this block partial is where a lot of the magic is happening. So each one of these, like each paragraph, if you will, or each list item, is a block, and passing a bunch of variables into the partial. And then we've got this big block container where we are setting a lot of values. Those values, most of them, are sort of set up here as like static values in the editor block controller. Block controls, I actually haven't built this part yet. That's going to be that slash command where we can have like a drop-down menu to change the formatting and whatnot. Then displaying the content. I'll get a little bit into how I'm kind of converting Markdown and stuff in just a minute. But this block here is where I'm sort of displaying the content. And then below that, we've got like a big form. The block form is sort of simple in that it really just has it's just like a lot of hidden fields, and we're using these hidden fields to pass different data about different scenarios. Like, all right, we're creating a new ordered list block, or we're converting a list item to a p tag. Because if you're in the bottom of a list, like if I do something like this, where if I'm in this list item and then I hit if I'm in this list item and I hit backspace, that needs to convert that list item into a p tag. And so I have like special logic just to handle that interaction. Or if I'm indenting a block, if I hit tab, that's going to indent this block along with its children. So a lot of like little stuff that's happening there. Going back to the main block partial, below the form, we've got this whole section for if it has children. So child blocks, currently that just means list items, essentially. Like if this is a list item that contains another list, then it's going to have child blocks. And then, last week I was working on, well, if you delete the only list item, then you also need to delete its parent UL and make sure that the ordering is all correct. So I'm tired just even talking about it, but I just want to show as much as I can because I am sort of proud of the progress that I've made on it so far. I guess the only other thing that I'm going to show in this video, this is sort of like a raw random video here, is how I am handling displaying the formatting, right? So let's say I've got this paragraph here and I'm going to make that bold. I'm going to do Command B. By the way, the keyboard shortcuts for bold, italic, underline, and so on, those work, and they will also sync to the state of these buttons. That's pretty cool. Okay, so a little bit on how the formatting is working. So here's a paragraph, and I have applied the bold styling to it. I simply just, did Command B, and it's synced up to the button state there. Let's take a look at that in the database. So that's this paragraph right here. And you can see I actually am storing the HTML for the bolding. And that's happening in, so when I'm editing this block, I'm actually using like content editable, turning that to true to make this editable, right? Same thing with italic. So if I do Command I and hit escape, that should save. No, that's not. I got to fix that. Yeah. So here is the I tag, and so there are a select few tags that I am actually saving in the data for each block. And so when I'm in the block partial, if the block has data, then we're going to render that block, unless it's a new block or some other scenarios. So what does this render thing do? Let's take a look at that. Basically, we're looking at what type of element it is. So by default, every paragraph is a P tag. Some of them are LI tags, some of them are ULs. But right now we're focused on P. So we're going to look to see like what is the element, right? So if it's a P tag, then we're going to actually wrap the content in a P tag. If it's an H1 tag, so for example, if I do this, And here is our heading 1. So the data itself is sort of just basically, I'm only showing HTML inside the data column for the bits of words within the content that need some formatting, like italic or bold or links, underlines, things like that. But the wrapper, the wrapping tag around the entire block, that gets defined in the element column. So far, my progress on this is to handle p tags, a bunch of heading tags, li tags, block quotes, pre, and I guess we fall back to p tags as well. I can make that more efficient. Now, you'll notice that I'm not actually handling the rendering of an unordered list or an ordered list. That's happening a little bit differently. So I'm going to start another list right here. So new list item 2, list item 3. Actually, you know what? Let me just delete everything to make it simpler. Okay, so I've simplified the blocks here, and let's take a look at what we have. We have the first P where I just say this is a list, and then I'm going to reorder it. So there's this UL element where I am defining the UL, but it has no content. That's because it's sort of the container for these list items, right? These list items define the parent over here. So these refer to that parent. And then if I have a sublist item, so this list item where it says list item 3, that's this one right here, has a children element of UL, and that's going to define these list items. So basically this item 3 is the parent of indented item and item 2. Finally, I am using the positioning gem, and that's handling the position. I actually have 2 different position columns. One is like the position column handles the position of top level elements. In this case, that's 1 p tag and 1 ul tag. And then we're using position in parent for any blocks that have parents. So these and these all have parents. So we use position in parent to figure those out. So anyway, I shared a lot more than I thought I was going to share here. It's not everything, of course. You're probably wondering about the Markdown stuff. So I did start to use some libraries for that, but I sort of ripped them out because it just made it all more complicated to deal with. So for the Markdown conversion, I'm actually just doing that in JavaScript. Let's see. So when I start typing, we're going to get the first word. Basically, after I click the space bar, it's going to get the first word. It's going to return the first word. We're going to check what is that first word, and if that first word starts with a Markdown syntax. So if I do, like a dash and then a space, this is going to detect that I have reformatted a block to be a UL, or like a 1 dot means I'm starting an ordered list, or two pound signs followed by a space, I'm converting it into an H2. So if that comes back, then we're going to pass all that data into the save function, which then gets passed into the controller, and then we make the reformatting logic, which does a bunch more complex stuff. So so basically, to show that in action, if I do followed by a space, that's going to trigger the reformatting, and then I'm actually just using basic CSS to present this as if it were an H2. See this like H2 style. I'm sort of like faking it, when we're in like editing mode. So here in editing mode, I'm sort of just giving the user some like visual cues over what they are editing. But then in the presentation mode, which is not yet styled, it's like an actual H2 tag. So that's the thinking there, is like the editor is going to have a ton of logic under the hood, but the presentation mode is clean HTML. So Anyway, that's where I'm at with Instrumental Editor. You can check it out at instrumentaleditor.com. That's where you can follow the progress. I am releasing these like 1-minute progress updates every now and again. I'm posting those to social media and posting them here on instrumentaleditor.com. Enter your email address here and you'll receive progress updates. And also, you can be one of the first to be in the early access group. So I'm working on this. I don't really have an estimated time for when this will be released. Right now, my thinking from a business standpoint is Instrumental Editor is going to be a paid product. It's not going to be an open source product or anything like that. It's just something that'll be on like a typical license and a component that you can use in Ruby on Rails projects. Same thing with instrumental components, which is also coming. So I'm just sort of like hacking on this. There's still a lot of refactoring that's required, and a lot more features to build into it before it's usable. But hoping to get it there in the next couple of months. Any questions or feedback? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.